Hello, everybody. As we get ready, it's day 5. 12, right on the money. It's day 5. This is day 5. Day 5. It's 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 day 5 of the second quarter. It's day 5 of the second quarter. I'm going to say it one more time. It's day 5 of the second quarter. It's day 5 of the second quarter. It's day 5 of the first quarter. It's day 5 of the first quarter. I meant to say that. It's day 5 of the first quarter. Day 5 of the first quarter of the second month of the first quarter. One thing that I've learned over the course of my becoming, as we getting ready, we getting situated. One thing I've learned over the last few years, remember this shit ain't linear. Something that I've learned to embrace. Something that I've learned to embrace is really asking myself questions. Really asking myself those questions and really understanding the space in which I'm in. Understanding the space in which I'm in. Understanding how my energy, understanding where my energy's at. Really getting into the aspects of being direct. I just ended the last class. I just ended the last class, Chakra and Shadow. I will be relaunching Chakra and Shadow later on in this year. The next class coming up is Tantra and Healing 888. I'm going to be launching that pretty soon. Got everything set up for that. Been working with my mentees, getting my mentees in place. Getting my mentees in place, getting my new advisories in place, getting my new clients in place for the first 6 months of this coming in the year. Peace. And I was asking myself a question. I give myself a link. I give myself some questions. If you're just coming in, I'm gonna repeat what I said in the opening. I asked the question. I was in the space of, this is day 5 of the first quarter of 2024, and it's the second month of 2024. One of the things that we're going to get into, we're going to get into this today, we're going to get into it today, is, are you ready to cross that line? Are you ready to cross that line? And simple question, are you ready to cross that line? Do you know what vulnerability truly entails and what vulnerability truly is? As I was doing my first resistant band workout today, I was sitting there thinking, and a lot of times for us, when you ask yourself the question, are you ready to cross that line? The thing that stops us from crossing that line, the thing that stops us from her, we will get to those readings in a little bit. Her. The thing that gets us into that space with ourselves of understanding, with being inside of that space, is the details that have to be assessed in crossing into that line. And the way that I built this out in the aspect of, a lot of times for us, right now, inside of our space, we're battling. Most people are battling consciousness, spiritual. Everybody want to battle and be like, spring doesn't start, the new year doesn't start until March 20th. Okay, cool. That is the spring equinox. But what about That's the second quarter. March 20th, the spring equinox, marks the second quarter of 2024. I want you to think about that. I want you to hold with that. It marks the second quarter of 2024 or whatever year that you go into. So what happens a lot of times in spaces, and I'm working with clients now, is right now in this point in time, everybody's talking about like, ooh, New Year's resolution. We going into the resolution and New Year's resolution, and I'm resolving da 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 da. The main thing with resolution is resolve. That's one simple thing. Think about it. The main thing when it comes into the aspects of a New Year's resolution is I am making this statement that I am going to be resolving said issues. But here's the thing. A lot of times we do this every time. You want to go to the gym, you got a whole Amazon cart full of fucking clothes, you got Fabletics, whatever it is where you grab all of this stuff. You grab all of these things and you start working out without a plan. You used to winging it. You start working out without a plan. You say, this year I'm going to start a new company. This year I'm going to do this. This year I'm going to do this. That's cool. That's great. But if you're going, a lot of times for us going into those spaces, when you're setting up into that space, you have to think about it like this. And this is that level of vulnerability. There's what precedes vulnerability and when we coming into the state of vulnerability. If I asked you a question simply in the aspects of this space right now, if I were to tell you, all right, cool, we're going to sit down, we're going to come together with this plan, but in this plan that we're breaking down for the next 6 months, we're going to be concentrating on your spending habits, your budget. We're going to be working on a budget for the next 6 months. Exactly, walking the talk. Are you going to be moving? We're going to work on a budget for the next 6 months. But in the first 3 months of that 6 months, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, where your emotional intelligence is at, where your emotions are at, where your energy is at. See, a lot of times we come into these spaces, we talk about, energy or energetics, not understanding that the physical manifestation of energy in this plane is going to be the emotional aspect. So now let's look at these levels of vulnerability. If I'm in the lower levels of vulnerability, the lower levels before I actually step into vulnerability, that's apathy, atrophy, and scarcity. Atrophy, apathy, and scarcity. Scarcity being the aspects of the fear of going without, that's survival. Atrophy being the state of you went to the gym for a whole week and worked out on arms. You went to the gym for a whole week and worked out on arms, and you went all week going hard on your arms. Then you woke up on Saturday and your arms was like this. You couldn't move your arms down. State of atrophy. The reason that you went into that state of atrophy is because you're not used to actually sitting with the feelings that you're not used. When working with me, you're not used to sitting in the aspect of being present with your emotions. A lot of times, every time you've ever wanted to go work out, most of the things that you do from a state of not stepping into that vulnerability or not being present with oneself, 9 times out of 10, the only time you're going to the gym is for you to lose weight. Think about it. I'm going to the gym to lose weight. I'm going to do this because I'm tired of being like this. Here's the thing. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. If I'm only going to the gym to lose weight, if I'm only going to the gym and I'm going to lose weight, losing weight is a byproduct of going to the gym. Therefore, I don't have to focus on that. We're going to get into this aspect. I don't have to focus on losing weight. I don't have to focus on toning. I don't have to focus on any of those things because those are natural parts of this process. What I need to focus on is what energy I'm using in that space, what energetics are coming up inside of that space. As I'm going through the state of a detox, when you go through a detox, what happens? All of a sudden, all of the woulda, shoulda, coulda, I should have did this longer, I'm never going to put this back into my body, I don't know how the hell I allow myself to get to this level. That's you tapping in, that's you becoming present. It's not, one of the things that I talked about in the class the last 6 weeks, when I was talking about in the class, is it's not that you are going to go do it, you've already been doing it. See, the biggest thing about crossing that line is sitting with the factor in the reality of what was really present. If every time that you come to a moment, and I've talked about this before, I talked through this work with my clients, if I'm feeling anxiousness and anxiety, that means my mind is too far into the future. That means I'm too far into the future tense. I'm worried about how it's going to look. I'm worried about how people are going to react. I'm worried about how people are going to feel about it. I'm too far into the future. That means I'm not present. If I have resentment, if I do it for a couple of days and I immediately start thinking, well, the last time I did this and the last time I did this, resentment, repression, trying to suppress something, that means I'm too far in the past. On both sides of that coin, I am not present. I'm not in the present moment. Because understanding being in the present moment, being in the present, that is the only place potential dwells. Only in the present is where potential dwells. Only in the present is where order dwells. Only in the present is where order dwells. Only in the present can I capitalize on potential. So what am I tapping into if I'm not present? If I'm stuck in my past, resentment, repression, suppression, I'm stuck in that past state of self, I'm usually stuck in dysfunction. That means I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym when I get off work. I'm going to go to the gym when I get off work. I'm going to do this when I get off work. I'm going to do this before I go to work. But at no point in time, since you're not present in the potential of order, when you were sitting there saying you were going to the gym in the first thing in the AM, you were going to the gym, your resolution to go to the gym first thing in the AM. You said you were going to go to the gym at 6 a.m. You're going to go to the gym at 6 a.m. Cool. How did you set that up? How did you set that up? How did you set that up? It's almost, it's the super low probability for me now to not wake up at 4 a.m. For my body not to come back, for my avatar not to come back online at 4 a.m. It is a low probability unless, in me being present, when I was teaching the class on Tuesday nights from 8 to about 11, the first Wednesday I tried to get up, like, I'm not into this. I had to listen to myself, was like, wait, you working out Monday, you go hard, you go intense on Monday. Intensity means consistently. Intensity means consistency. So intense, my workout is intense on Monday. My run is intense on Tuesday. I need to take a break in between these 2 points. See, before that aspect of me crossing that line and me getting back into that health, I was treating it like everything else. I talked about this in the live we did last week. I was the same thing. A lot of the times when you're doing a lot of these things, you're not understanding the details, the energetics, the emotions that go behind that. So the same way that you try to make the gym, the same way that you try to make everything that you do is everything that you do. There is no separation. So the same way that you treat your job is the same way you're going to treat the gym. Which means you're going to go to the gym long enough to get some type of payment, that profit, but you're not understanding that profit is gross. That profit is the gross profit. It's not the net profit. It's not the take home. So now you go into the gym and you're wondering why You're going to the gym and you're wondering why every time I go to the gym and I work out, I never see the results. Here's the reality, as me being a trainer. You're not going to see those results inside the gym. You're not going to see the tone inside of your arms, the tone in your body when you're in the gym working out. You're not going to see it. It's unfamiliar. You have not built up the muscle memory in your body in the recovery. Similar to the only time that you digest any food, digest any information is when you're going into a resting state. Is the same thing when anytime you do anything, it's only in the resting state to when you're able to recover. But if you are accustomed to working until you're burnt out, working until you're tired, going until your body gives out, and you use that as your marker of now it's time for you to recover, you don't know how much damage you're actually doing. Let's get deeper. You don't even know what emotional language that you're using, energetic tone that you're using. If you're going to the gym, let's use an example. If you're sitting inside of your space and you're still acting, you don't even realize where you're emotionally present at. Let's say when you were younger, like for me, for example, when I was younger, I'll use myself as an example. I remember when I was younger, I was like 4 or 5, 5 or 6, 7 or 8. I remember my pops was sitting in the living room and I was walking into the kitchen. And he said something about my weight. He said, "You about to go eat again?" I got quiet. I shut down. Didn't realize what I was doing. I shut down. I went in there. I went and got an apple off the table. My mom had just went grocery shopping. And I went in my room. Not understanding at that very point, that was my first unresolved experience with my emotional energy. That was my first unresolved point. Uncategorized. I didn't regulate it, didn't know how to regulate it. So now every time I was going to work out, every time I was doing something, I'm still acting on that energetic point. I did not acknowledge, even though I acknowledged, I felt shame, even though I acknowledged that I felt insecure, even though I acknowledged insecurity, the behavior, I didn't accept the emotion. See, one of the biggest things, and when we're working in those processes, is understanding that the insecurity, the feeling of insecurity, the feeling of disrespect, the feeling of, even when it comes to the correspondence of guilt, the correspondence of anger, that is the behavior that is unregulated. What is behind, or what is at the core of that behavior, is the energetic. This is why every time you see somebody going to the gym and they working out when they angry, they working out when they stressed, or even when you get in relationships when you stressed, or whatever it may be, that's the behavior. You're validating that behavior. So by the time you go through the entire process, not understanding how the process works, one of the simplest aspects that I break down all the time, the emotional impulse is only 90 seconds. The emotional impulse is only 90 seconds. Any emotion that you feel is only 90 seconds. After that 90-second impulse, that 20 to almost 30 minutes after that initial impulse, that is either you're regulating or you're in a state of deregulation. Most of the times, because if you're feeling insecure and it's based on guilt or shame, most of the times, think about the conversation that you have with yourself. Right after that. Think about who you go have a conversation with. Think about who you go have a conversation with. Something can be wrong. We can start with the ladies first. Something can be wrong. Something could have been brought up to the surface, brought to the table, brought to your attention. And the next thing you do for the next which is remember, time is not linear, so 20 minutes can be a day, 20 minutes can be a day, 20 minutes can be an hour, 20 minutes can be the next 2 weeks, 20 minutes can be whatever it may be. Because time is not linear. You're going to go talk to, he was wrong, girl. You shouldn't have, girl, you're doing the best that you can. You're getting you're filling up that space of scarcity. You were brought to a vulnerable space, but you do not know how to process inside of a vulnerable space because most of the things that you have acquired up to a certain point were based on scarcity. Most of the things that came into your space were based on apathy. Most of the things that you did, your behaviors and your patterns, were based on setting to a state of atrophy. That means stimulation to the aspect of till it dies down. So now think about the behaviors and the habits that you developed over the years. Think about those behaviors and those habits that you developed when you were little. Your first time actually going to a state of atrophy. When you're going into a state of atrophy, when it came to a situation to where your feelings weren't heard. You were not acknowledged. You were not accepted. It was no room for assessment. So now you have to think about the behavior that you have now assimilated and the patterns that you created around it. Remember, I say this shit all the fucking time. One of the easiest analogies to use. Something can be positive and no longer serve a purpose. Something can be positive and no longer serve a purpose. Just as something can be negative and it still serves a certain purpose. Give an example. It was positive back in the day when your mother breastfed you. But at no point in time right now could I hit up my mom and be like, Mom, I need some breast milk. That doesn't make it negative. It's just, it still was a positive aspect, but it no longer serves me a purpose. But in that same instance, something could have happened, an argument could have ensued between me and my mother of a misunderstanding, and it made me feel negative. It made me feel negative. So my reaction to it later on became a pattern or an obsessive habit with trying to prove myself to when I was in relationships with women at those points in time. I'm still acting off of the negative. No matter what I'm going to do, no matter what I'm going to say, what actions, whatever it formed, I'm still acting off of that negative. Therefore, that negative charge is still going to pull in those experiences for me to either resolve, come to a resolution with myself, or continue to evade it. Come to a solution, come to that resolution, or come to evading it. This is the aspect of, are you willing to cross that line? This is one of the states of what's you're willing to cross that line. This is when we come into the aspect where people talk about, I'm going to protect my peace because people try to take my peace away. Here's the thing. If I'm moving in scarcity trying to protect my peace, I'm actually moving in the space of neutrality. There's the lower level underneath vulnerability in the aspect before you come into a state of cultivating peace, the aspect of feeling, the understanding of peace, the overflow of peace is neutrality. A lot of us stay inside of states of neutrality, and when you can tell when you're in a state of neutrality because every time you go into a situation, you ask yourself a question. You ask yourself the question, how is this going to affect my peace? This is going to take away my peace, but I still need to go there. That's family. All of these different narratives pop up. That's letting you know that you're in a state of neutrality and you're in a state of, if I don't acknowledge it, I don't have to accept it. If I don't have to accept it, I don't have to take the assessment and take the level of accountability needed to process the apology. Apologizing to myself. The apology is the decree to change my behavior. So if I have an issue, that negative aspect with my mother, long due resolved, a negative aspect of a conversation with my mother, and I have not come to the state of apologizing to myself, if I cannot come into the state of apologizing to myself, decreeing that I need to change, then I never sit inside the space of, I have this happen every single time when I'm inside of a session or consultation. And I always ask the question, can you forgive your mother? Can you forgive your father? Can you forgive your stepfather? Can you forgive that person? Can you forgive that person? I always get the same face, but like, no, I never thought about that. Here's the thing. Until I have resolved that internal conflict, this internal dialogue, I'm only going to, the only things that will surface is everything that is going to surface is going to be based on me resolving this issue or me continuing to evade this issue. How do we evade the issue? You want to become the first to do this, the first to do that. It doesn't matter what the hell you becoming the first to do as. Think about the emotional age. One of the hardest things for me to accept earlier on in my journey was understanding that the reason that a lot of things I cannot understand, I cannot deal with certain pressures, I cannot exist in certain spaces, is because I was still emotionally acting from when I was 13 years old. Imagine being a 13-year-old and you're at a job. Imagine you being 13 years old and you going to work every day. Visualize you being 13 years old emotionally, in that emotional state, that mental state, and you're trying to comprehend aspects at your job. You're trying to comprehend aspects of relationships. You're trying to comprehend everything's going to go to a state of atrophy. That's you shutting down. That's you shutting down. That's you either shutting down, you're living in the extremes. Being in a state of scarcity is surviving in the extremes. So when we think about the aspect, we're going to bring it all around, make a bullet point. When you're thinking about there's four quarters to every cycle of every year. Gnostic teaching teaches us that this is a space that's inherently flawed and there are 4 quarters. But if I'm always thinking about, if I get the information to intellectualize and I'm like, the first quarter is in spring, that's the second quarter. I'm already behind. So now think about the environment. Remember, your behaviors create the integrations and the interactions of your environment. Your patterns formulate your environment, and your habits sustain your environment. So let's look at your behavior if your behavior is based in scarcity. We see it all the time. We saw it all the time up until 2020, up until when COVID hit, and the usual method of madness. The usual method to madness is by March. Oh, that's income tax time. I'm going to get ahead on a couple of bills. You never get ahead on a couple of the bills. What do you end up doing? You know what? I deserve taking a trip. I deserve to take a trip. I worked hard all year. I deserve to take this trip. Budget out the window. By the time you get to November, which is the first month of the fiscal new year. The first month of the fiscal new year is November. Is in November. The second month is December. November 21st, between November 15th and November 21st marks the quarter, the first quarter, the quarter recap from the last 3 quarters. If you read anything in the aspects of dealing with business, you pay your taxes every quarter. You pay your taxes, and I go talk to my financial advisor every quarter. That's why in December 21st marks the first day of the winter solstice. That's the day when you go into the rest. That's when you go into the resting state. That's when you go into the theta state. That's when you go into the resting state. And you're now going back into the sleep state. Then you're awakened in January 1st, second quarter of the new year. You're awakened to your resolutions. You're awakened to your resolutions. You're awakened to your intentions and your affirmations. But for most, at most, inside of that space is what we're learning for. You haven't even recovered from Thanksgiving or trauma giving. You haven't even recovered from Christmas, so to speak. Even if you are going back and forth, I don't celebrate Christmas, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. All right, cool, that's cool. But then you come into February 15th, the day before, the February 15th, after February 15th is not just Side Chick Day. February 15th marks the second quarter, the midpoint of the mid-end point, the cusp of the first quarter, when you're making those next steps, your budgets, your plans. But if I'm not used to sitting, I remember I wasn't used to sitting inside of that type of space. I was just used to going, you'll tell yourself, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to do this. Okay. You're not used to actually processing anything. I wasn't used to the actual process. I wasn't used to the actual feeling. I was always stuck in a space of how fast can I move from this point to this point and what does it mean? Now, if you look at me inside of a space, understanding that instead of here goes the game. Vulnerability. Moving into the higher states of vulnerability. Overflow, cultivation, overflow, cultivation, and empathy. Apathy is the lack thereof feeling. Empathy is the embrace of all feeling. So if you sit here and tell me that I'm working with these energies, but if I ask you about human narratives, the manifestation of those emotions, I don't really deal with my emotions. They're messy. I don't really deal with feelings and emotions. How can you use energy if you don't understand the feeling? This is a lot of times when you sitting inside of that space and you sit there and you meditate, but you don't know how to breathe. You sit there and you're doing everything in separation. You're doing everything in separation. I made some posts the other day. Everything that you write out is everything that you post. If I would give you the aspects of everything that you write on your page is a petition. Every photo, every picture that you put on your page is a damn sigil. That's the petition. That's the sigil. So then you sit there and wonder, why is my life not where it needs to be? And why does this keep happening to me? Why I keep getting played with? Because you wrote the petition out that way. You wrote out the petition that way. When you put that page post on your post about being tired of people playing with your name, and you wrote that on your page, and everybody that agreed to it and was rah-rah-rahing you, that was the energy. You were telling your energy exactly where to go. When you posted that photo, or you're posting that video, or you're posting that picture that is based on an aspect of fear-mongering, you're showing exactly where your energy is at. You're showing exactly where your energy is at. Every time you sit there and you make this inherent complaint about somebody being inside of your inbox on your page, you're writing out a new petition. It's showing, but here's the thing. If you sit with it, even if you don't understand how to sit with it, yes, exactly. Even if you don't know how to sit with it, That's the first stage inside of your process. Instead of you wait, because I say this all the time. The first sign is the thought that you had. Where did that thought take you? The first sign that you are going to get is the thought. Where did that thought take you? Did it take you down into the lower aspect? Did it take you down to the lower emotions? Guilt, shame, apathy. Guilt, shame, apathy, atrophy, and then you froze? Yeah, I don't want to deal with that right now. Or did it take you up? Did it take you into a space of, damn, I've been working on this for the last couple of months. I've been doing this for the last couple of weeks. I've been in this space. I've been moving in this space. Damn. Did it take you into a space where it's things that you need to validate? Or did it take you into a space of confirmation, meaning you're already inside of that right space? Most of the time, we'll sit there inside of a space and we'll wait for we'll take the first sign that is actually the last sign. We take the confirmation or the validate. Since we're taking the last sign, that means by the time that shit popped up on your page, by the time it popped up on your page, by the time you got the text message, by the time you got the phone call, now you want to react. So ask yourself, moving in scarcity is when you're always quick to react. Moving in overflow is when you understand the process of acquisition. Let's talk business. All this shit's business. All this shit's business. Shit's business, baby. An acquisition a minimum state for an acquisition is 6 months. You ain't done shit based on, i.e., the courting process. The courting process is an acquisition process. The acquisition process is the courting process. When we talk about relationships, we don't get into that in the Tantra 888. That's the courting process. The courting process is designed for you to get all of the information that you need. But if you're not used to sitting with the relationship with oneself, the emotions with oneself, 9 times out of 10, when you go into that space, what are you looking for? You skip totally over courting. You skip totally over the courting process, and you skip straight into dating. So now you're trying to apply to interest, i.e. patterns, habits, i.e. stimulation, that match your behavior. You're trying to match your behavior. Well, I've done this. Okay. Here's the biggest aspect inside of the space. One of the things that I realized with myself. I no longer find myself having to tell somebody or tell anyone how to treat me, how to approach me, how to speak to me. I don't have to do that anymore. The reason why is because moving from a state of overflow, when I first wake up, how I want to be treated is how I had that conversation with myself first thing between 4 and 5 o'clock. That's how I want to be talked to. Affirmations, setting intentions, meditations, breath work. I demonstrate it. I demonstrate it in the present form, in present. When I sit there inside of my space and I go for my workout, I go for my run, or I go to the gym, I'm actually loving to go for my run and doing my workouts outside rather than going to the gym. That's me showing myself how I would like to demonstrate how my energy is cultivated. I don't have a conversation with the public space until about 10:30, 11 o'clock. But I had to create that space. See, that processing point of crossing that line is you have to realize you have to deal with the details now. See, that's the hard part, is really dealing with those details. Dealing with the details. One of my main things that I'm having conversations with my clients is like, have you built that out yet? What does that look like? What does a day in that space look like? What does a day What does a self-care day look like for you? How intimate are you in the aspects of your self-care routine? You're not doing, this is the biggest thing when we come into a state of overflow versus scarcity. In scarcity, you will only do it until you get, switch into the sun. In a space of scarcity, you'll meditate until either for one or two extremes. Remember, in scarcity, you're activating on the extremes. You'll meditate until you feel, ooh, I felt something, I can stop. Or once you don't feel it, you stop. And then you end up trying to go redo it. Okay, cool. I haven't meditated in a minute. I know I need to go meditate. In a state of overflow, sitting in true vulnerability, I'm always in a state of meditation. What does meditation mean? It means in a state of being aware. It's a state of being in sync, in a state of being aware. So I must go through these lessons first of my awareness. How I dictate my energy and my flow of my energy. What am I in sync with? When I go through a meditation, when I go through a guided meditation with people, or I give out exercises based on guided meditations, a lot of I know it's going to come up. I didn't feel right. I know you didn't feel right. You weren't supposed to. See, the aspect of active moving in a state of scarcity is the moving in that state of scarcity is you're always moving in a state of apathy. Which means, now we think about the aspects when we come into the psychological aspect. If you've been in high conflict situations, high conflict environments, that means you were always around a state of arguments. There was always arguing going along. Your mom and your dad, your mom and a boyfriend, or your dad and his girlfriend, they were arguing, and then your mom went in the kitchen and cooked that chicken. All of that energy went into the chicken. So now you ate the chicken. So now you wondering why the chicken, now you wondering why, because everybody thinks about this and never really thinks about it. Now you're wondering why food don't taste the same after you do a detox, after you've been inside of your path for a little bit. It's not that it wasn't real, it's just that the emotions that used to go into that food. Like, I give an example. There was one Chinese spot that I went to every time I went to go visit my family in New York. Every fucking time. If there wasn't a little kid behind right there by the little carry-out joint, if they weren't arguing in the back, I wouldn't eat the food. I remember going through my first 30-day detox and then going back to try to get me some egg rolls. Food tasted fucking horrible. The food smelled weird. It tasted horrible. It smelled like urine. I ain't never noticed it. It's not that it changed. It's not that it changed. I changed. See, the aspect of you understanding the voice of that feeling when you're sitting with those feelings and sitting with those energetics is understanding that the change, we're always used to looking for the physical change. We're always used to trying to sympathize the need for mental change. We're always trying to sympathize the aspects for the emotional changes. If this doesn't happen, if this happened and this happened and this happened, and they did this and they did this, it would be perfect. Only thing perfect is death. Death is a state of transition to rebirth. So if you're always waiting to the point of death, i.e. you're always waiting for the last quarter, you're always looking at the last quarter as the first quarter for you to change. Every time that you come into a space where it's time to resolve it, you never can resolve it. You'll go through the entire cycle, every single quarter. You don't have conversations with yourself. You do not have a self-care routine in place. That's an actual self-care routine because you're trying to do it separately, not understanding that every time you go into the mirror and brush your teeth, you're doing mirror work. It's not separate. Every time you go into the shower and you allow the water to hit your head for 15 minutes, to hit you in your chest or hit you on your back, for 15, 20 minutes. You just did a you just meditated underwater. It's not separate. It's just that you're in a state of scarcity. You don't think about you don't think about meditating in the shower because you just got off work and you're tired. All you're thinking about is because where's your mind? Is it present or is it in the future? All you're thinking about is what show am I going to binge watch on Hulu while I eat this rice bowl, while I eat let's go even wilder with it. What murder mystery crime show am I going to watch on Netflix and Hulu? What am I going to watch on TV while I eat my pineapples? While I'm eating my pineapples. You feel what I'm saying? Because when you're moving inside of that space, you're not moving in a full state of awareness. The first stage of consciousness is pain. The first stage of consciousness is pain. The rebirth. Most people never come up out of the pain because the pain, to cross that line from consciousness to come into the aspects of the spiritual space, the unfamiliar, you got to deal with the details. See, that's one of the hardest things that you coming into that spiritual space. Spirituality meaning learning how to breathe. Spirit meaning breath. You get the information, but you want to intellectualize it. You're always breathing. It's not separate. It's not separate. You have to learn how you once used to breathe. You have to acknowledge how you once used to breathe. That is a process. You must accept how you used to breathe. That's the first wave of the process, is accepting and how you partook in it, in your breath, how you partake in breathing, whether it was gossiping, whether it was every other month you would talk about a new idea, you would talk about a new relationship, you would just listen to your homegirl talk about the man that she was with, and he was a married man, and how she keep finding these married ass men and shit. But the reason that she keep finding married men, you know why, but you are scared to cross that line and tell her, like, well, the reason you keep finding married men is because your mom was the other woman. So you don't want to tell your friend that. And that's cool. That's cool. One of the biggest things that I tell all of my clients when we're going through their process, when we're sitting in those sessions, is that you're going to have people that you are used to giving so much information to. You now have new tools inside of your toolbox. I have no problem with you telling that person that has that issue or whatever it may be, and you're saying, I do not have the capacity or ability to deal with this, but I know somebody that you could talk to. Just give them the information. See, this is the biggest aspect. When you're moving in a state of overflow, you're moving in a state of your truth. When you're moving in a state of scarcity, you're moving in looking for an answer. You're looking for the answer. You're looking for the reaction. You're looking for the reaction. When you're moving in a state of overflow, i.e. you're moving in the state of the truth, you're allowing it to do exactly what it needs to do. You're allowing the truth of where you need to process information. You have a lack in a capacity. You have a lack of ability and capacity. It's not a bad thing. Where do I need to sit to cultivate that? Where do I need to sit to cultivate raising my ability and raising my capacity for trusting, raising my capacity and ability for self-care and love with myself? I'm only going to be able to find that if I'm sitting in a state of empathy. That means allowing all of these feelings to come in. That's allowing all of those feelings to come in. Everything I've been warding off, and I've been, oh my God, you gonna ward off all, I don't want none of this shit coming into me. I'm tired of attracting all this. But every full moon, you want to do a calling your energy back to you. But you don't want to, if you're not sitting with the aspect of the feeling and what that feeling truly is, what that emotion energetic truly is, how do you know what you're calling back to you? How do you know what you're calling back to you? That energy attached to something inside of that space. Remember, when you plant something, it doesn't instantly come up. It has to germinate. It has to be fertilized. So that energy that you released into that space, into that realm, into that space at that point in time, it was going through its germination process. It went through the fertilizing process. What was fertilizing it? What was fertilizing that seed? Insecurity, doubt, shame, fear, trying to survive, just trying to make it to the next day. So what do you think is going to populate? What do you think is going to populate? Of course, on your Facebook, on your timeline, on your news feed, you're going to get, now let's think about the aspect of you working out. Of course, you're going to go down your news feed and you're going to see every supplement commercial known to man, and the people that you see are already in shape. They got the whole abs. They got everything cut. And you're like, yeah, that's what I want to see. I have an exercise for everybody. Before I want to say that's, before I do that reading. The next time you do your vision board, how far do you get into the process of creating your vision board? Here's this game. I've started doing this a while back. Instead of me saying that I want a house, okay, cool. You want a new home, you want a new space of business. All right, cool. I don't break it down. 9 times out of 10, when you going through these processes, you don't break it down fully. You don't break it down all the way to the full. You'll sit there and you'll go get a picture. You'll get a picture of some keys, holding them in front of a house, and you'll be like, yep, soon I'm going to get my own new house. I'm going to get my new space. What about the sigil? What about a sigil? How often do you actually use sigil work? See, that picture is a outdated version of your sigil. That's why every time you see it, but you don't really feel it. You see it, but you don't really feel it. It really doesn't have any personal to you. And usually it takes you back into your past. Yeah, I'm trying to get a car because I remember having to walk everywhere. And then you think about the future, man, when I get my car. So now when you're sitting in that present moment, you get triggered again. Man, see, that's why I got to get a car, because I'm tired of having to depend on everybody, but you're never present. You're never personally present with how you actually feel. You're never actually present with it. This is the biggest aspect of, so now most of the times, the job, the relationship, everything that you're getting into when it's based on scarcity is always based to a space of atrophy. If you do not, you want an example, every podcast is gender wars. Every podcast is what you bring to the table. All this information, it's the same information over and over and over again. But the information leaves you connected to scarcity. It leaves you in a state of being anxious. It leaves you in a state of being resentful because you're not present. Moving in a state of overflow allows me to be able to cultivate. So it doesn't matter what happens within the day. For me now, it doesn't matter what happens for me inside of the day. The ideas keep flowing in. And because I'm not shut down, because I'm sitting in that actual state of vulnerability with myself, every idea, every thought that comes in, I actually can allow it to pass through. I can grab what I want and allow the other stuff to pass by because I know it'll cycle back around. I'm not getting stuck on, damn, I'm not here yet. Or damn, I'm not doing this yet. Or I should have been here 3 years ago. Or I should have been here 4 years ago. All right, where's that feeling taking you? 4 years ago, where were you at? Ask yourself the question. 4 years ago, where were you at? 4 years ago, what were you doing? 4 years ago, where was your level of accountability? 4 years ago, where was your level of emotional EQ? Your emotional intelligence. 4 years ago, where was your level of acceptance? 4 years ago, where were you really at? See, when you start sitting in those spaces, you start realizing that everything in that space happened exactly as it was supposed to happen. Yes, it could have did this more, and yeah, it could have did that more, and yeah, this could have happened more. But that's because the reason that you get stuck on those points is because you're thinking based on end and not based on beginning. One of my favorite things that I embrace when I do my routines, even when I do my breath work now, is this is the ending. I'm stepping into the beginning. And imprinting that and embedding that into myself, into my presence. That I'm in this space. This is the ending. The feeling that I'm having is signaling the end. What's about to begin? If you go in based on, okay, I thought I was beginning and now it ended again, you're not going to be able to embrace the actual experience. You won't be able to embrace the experience. You know what I'm saying? There were so many times when I would sit inside of spaces and I was not able to embrace that fullness of that actual experience because I wasn't used to actually feeling. I wasn't used to the actual state of actually feeling. Past that shutdown state. So my behavior of insecurity made me form patterns based on insecurity. So I need someone to, so think about it like this. Now we go to the fellas. This is an aspect for the fellas. The fear of vulnerability, whether it be masculine or present, let's look at what masculine energy is and what feminine energy is. The feminine presence and the feminine energy is an affirmation. Is the affirmation. It's the affirming. Feminine energy is the affirming. Masculine energy is the confirmation. So if you have a conversation with a shorty and you're the confirmation and you're already going in there based on, you're not present when you're having that conversation. You're in a state of, you're still repressing your past. You're still suppressing your past. You don't know how to regulate the emotion. That's okay. We can work on that. But when you go into that space, she's going to affirm what you're already confirming. See, this is why I don't share. This is why I don't do this. This is why I don't do this list of things. It's not that you don't do these things. It's because you have not created a space of vulnerability. You have not learned to create the space of vulnerability with yourself. On the feminine aspect, one thing that I do not subscribe to and I will not subscribe to is women acting masculine. No, you're acting in the wounded feminine. Or men acting more feminine. No, they're acting in the wounded masculine. It's the wounded male sense. The wounded male perspective, the wounded female perspective. The highest point to the wounded perspectives is when you hear people say, I'm an alpha woman, I'm an alpha female, and I'm an alpha male. That is the highest point of the wounded perspective before it has to reset itself. That is the low. When we talk about chakras, the brain wave patterns, the delta state is the root state, is the root space. The theta wave is the resting state. Sacral chakra. The solar chakra is the alpha wave. That is the awareness. I feel, I am, I feel, I do. Everybody wants to talk about, niggas going to try to be betas. You don't understand that the beta wave is broken down into 3 waves. That's why the heart space is the beta wave. is broken down into 3 points: gathering, integration, and processing. So if you're always stuck in the alpha state, the only thing you're going to be stuck, if you're always stuck in an and we talk about the chakras being over, under, or balanced. Over, under, or balanced. So if I'm always in an overridden state in everything that I do, I'm overcompensating for everything that I do. I do this for this. I do this because I didn't have this. I do this because I didn't have this. I'm always going to be in a state of processing in that beta wave. I don't have time to integrate. I don't have time to gather new information. That's why every time you get information, listen how you talk to yourself. Every time you get some information, every time you get a download, I got a download from the ancestors. I got a download from the spirits. You immediately want to hop on Facebook. The moment you get some information, you immediately want to process it. You haven't sat with the information. You haven't integrated the information. That's why it comes out. So that's why by the time you start to speaking it, it sounds broken. It sounds biased. It sounds challenging. It sounds very off-putting. It sounds very offsetting. So then when you start seeing things I see, everything that you envision is based on, I got to help my people. But who are you to help your people? What are your feelings in the aspect of helping your people? What are you doing actively in your present? Are you actively in the present trying to add aid and guidance? So how are you speaking? How are you breaking it down? If everything you says gives everybody the, oh my God, it feels so good, but nothing that you're saying is forcing people to ask you questions, it's not forcing people to sit down with themselves for a little bit, that's the processing. So you only understand based on to a certain, I didn't get this, so now think about this. By the time you get to that understanding, that crown chakra point, I understand that that's when it usually becomes, motherfuckers ain't ready for this. They ain't ready to have this type of conversation. How have you simplified it? For the first year of me going public with me doing my work as the God-Occult Alchemist, every day I said, it was a mantra for me, and I was giving a mantra to everybody else. So I was writing a petition on my page. I said, you are a brand, you are a platform, you are a corporation. How are you representing your brand, your platform, and your corporation? How are you representing yourself? How are you showing up for you? If every time you say every time you ask yourself that question, you have this talk, you have this conversation with yourself or something similar, you're like, every time I show up for myself, people think that I'm being selfish. Why have you not accepted being selfish? Selfish is a prefix meaning I am to become. So if people are calling me selfish, what am I becoming? Am I becoming active, or am I going to become more passive? If I become more active, then I can accept that person for what they said. I can forgive them for me making them feel that way. I can then apologize to myself because I'm still learning. I can now assess what is there to be learned inside of this space. I can now accept that I don't have to partake in this space anymore. It's time for me to level up. It's time for me to move out of that space. I can acknowledge that it will be a process and I do not know how to do it. Now, what comes up? What comes across your page? What video pops up on your page? What comes across your page? You're always being given everything is happening for you and not to you. Scarcity has you in a mindset of everything happening to you. They, them. Overflow forces you to say the name. See, overflow, coming into that vulnerability, sitting in that space of that overflow, it forces you to say the name. One of my things that I said earlier on lectures, on Friday night lectures, every fucking night, every fucking Friday, back in 2019, was the first person that you must lay fault on for the continuing of what's happening in your life is you. It's going to be you first. You see how it cycles back around, the cultivating of you being selfish, the cultivating of you coming into that state of true vulnerability brings you into a state of overflowing and overwhelming emotions that need to be cultivated, but they have to be in a state of empathy for me to be able to sit in this state of vulnerability versus you being in a state of scarcity. As I look real quick, let me do my I had to go see that. I'm gonna do Stephanie's reading. Stephanie, if you are present, you can put a little hand gesture, like little hand up in a little emoji. Thumbs up, a heart, double face, whatever you would like. Because I want you to take 6 deep breaths. I want you to take 6 deep breaths following my prompt. I want you to take that nice deep breath in. Take that deep breath in. I want you to hold it. I want you to sit there with that. I want you to hold that. I want you to allow yourself to relax. I want you to allow yourself to become open. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe that out nice and slow. Take that next deep breath in. Take it all in, take it all in, take it all in. Allow all of those feelings to come up. Fight the resistance, and allow the pressure to build. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out slow. Allow your body to relax in that. Take that next deep breath. Anything that's popping out to you, allow it to pop out. Allow it to surface. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. One thing I will guarantee: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go and take that next deep breath in for me. That's a nice deep one right there. Hold it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and let that out. Sit with it a little bit before you take the next deep breath. Go ahead and take it in slow. Take this breath in slow. While you're taking this breath in, this is the 5th breath, I want you to pull up on your pelvic floor. I want you to do a nice little Kegel. I want you to hold that I want you to hold that pull up as you breathe out slowly. Hold it while you're breathing out slowly. As you're taking in this breath, I want you to release that contraction. I want you to hold it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out slowly. When you're ready, say ready, and I'm going to start your reading. Alright. Ooh. First card to pop off. First card to pop off is that nice old devil card. Before I do this aspect, disclaimer of how I do readings. When I do readings, I read the energy and I use the card to illustrate said energy rather than use the card to illustrate using it in reverse. First card popped up was the devil card. That devil, that's the aspect of that possessiveness. That's that possession. That's that possessiveness in that space. And let's see what goes beside that aspect. Build that out. The Knave of Cups. As I'm seeing that aspect, when I look at the Knave, when I look at those cups, you have an opportunity to let go and actually look. A lot of times when we sit inside of that space, the thing that holds us back from actually taking a state of assessment is the fear of what we're going to see, the fear of what we're going to feel. That goes into the aspects of Queen of Cups. When it comes into the state of being in that possessive state, we have to look at what we have been nurturing, or what we have been nurturing, what we have used that old space, or that what we're not acknowledging, what we're starting to stay away from acknowledging. A lot of times when we look at that aspect of we nurturing ourselves and we're looking, taking that opportunity, it represents the aspects of the end of a cycle. For you, you come into the end of a cycle. Your idea of peace is not what peace has been. Your idea of what peace was, it's not that it wasn't peace. It's not that all of a sudden it started off peaceful, then it became unpeaceful. You have to accept that it wasn't based on being at peace. That leads into the aspects of the Five of Swords. The Five of Swords represents introspective. The Five of Swords represents introspective. You're not getting peace because you're not starting in peace. You're not coming into a space in peace. A lot of times when we're stuck in a possessive state or a situation where it's possessing all of our time, possessing all of our energy, or we feel like we're being in that state of being possessive, when it becomes an opportunity to actually sit there and like, what the hell is what am I drinking? What am I taking in? What am I taking in? It's exactly what you said that you needed inside of that space. That goes into the aspects of that decision. As I'm looking at the aspects of that 3 with that 5, I'm looking at that infinite cycle of a lot of times when you go into a lot of these situations, you hold on for dear life. You hold on for dear life. Whenever something good comes up, you try to hold on to it at all costs. You try to hold on to it at all costs. Mm-hmm. 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 That leads, is that what you just said? Leads into the aspects of the Empress. The Empress is a state of acknowledgement. Here's the thing about the aspect of changes. The way that we know that something is changing is the way that the reception is received. If I go into a space, if I go to, when I was working if I go and say I'm going to change my schedule at my job. I remember initially you changing the schedule at your job. It's not going to be well received. What comes after that, what comes after that aspect is usually the manager or whoever's in charge of the schedule is going to try to do you dirty. It's going to seem like they're doing you dirty, or they're disrespecting you, or they're not honoring your energy. Here's the thing. They're giving you more space. But the thing is, a lot of times when we want to take, especially when we're taking accountability, that Knave of Swords, the opportunity to cut things out of our lives, the biggest thing that stops us in a lot of times in that space is we try to make a reason to keep it inside of our space. Nah, but I can keep that part and I can keep that part. Here's the thing about accepting change. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing about accepting change. Everything has to be assessed. Everything has to be assessed. Everything has a level. The only consistent thing in change is you. The only thing consistent with accountability is you. One of the biggest things that we fall into, one second. One of the biggest things that we fall into, or we fall victim to, when we're cutting out things in our life, or we're setting new tones in our life, setting new patterns in our life, one of the biggest things that comes up is the aspect of, shit, it's realizing how I started it in the first place. The first level of that accountability is accepting how I started this in the first place. What was I looking for originally? When we think about, you said aspect, new marriage, blended families, and that aspect. What is the biggest thing when we're accepting change and accountability is we have to accept that we're creating a new foundation. But the one thing that we tend to like scale away from is understanding the zoning process. One thing that I like called the zoning process. When you're going into a new space and you're building a new foundation, the first level is zoning. Whether you're building a building, you're building a shed, whatever it may be, you putting a fence up around your house, is zoning. What is the dynamic? What is the tone? What is the atmosphere? What is the soil that I'm tapping into? What am I planning on? Once you take accountability for that aspect, it goes to the Knight of Swords. A lot of times we move in haste because we've never had it, because it's showing us things that we tend to look more for what I like to call considerable favor to what is familiar. We look to what is familiar based on what is negative and what we've normalized. We don't really understand what we've normalized in our lives. It may have not been normal. So a lot of times what that Knight of Swords represents when we make a decision, the Knight represents the opportunity to make a new decision, the opportunity to move on a decision, but it also represents a lot of times we become hasty. A lot of times we become hasty. And that leads into the aspects of that Hierophant. The Hierophant is the external version of the hermit stage. Is the exalted or the exalted aspect of the hermit. When I'm sitting in the internalized aspects of change, accountability, growth, discipline, those are the things that I have to sit inside of that space with myself as the hermit. The external aspect, if I'm moving in a certain way and I'm sitting inside of a space, it leads into the aspects of the opportunity. You are now inside of a space where a lot of shit, that overflow, is some shit that you were not really familiar with. This is a new instance for you. But now it's coming up as, okay, cool, I need to make these changes in my life. I need to make these changes in my life. I need to do this in my life. I need to do this. I need to make changes. Here's the thing about the changes and the growth inside of our spaces. They're not meant to be received. Because think about it like this. What would be the point of changing if all my shit was received the way I wanted it to be received? If it was to be received and to keep me in a side of a familiar feeling, what is the point of me to change? Change leads to sitting in an unfamiliar space. Change leads to sitting in an unfamiliar space and really sitting and saying, have I been moving in scared? The first thing, a lot of times we got to admit, I love hard, as an example. You didn't love hard, you loved undisciplined. It was an undisciplined state of self. So it wasn't that you never, it's true that you never experienced the love that you wanted to experience because you never gave it to yourself. So now when you come into these unions, i.e. like a new marriage, blended families, the aspect of when we talked about what I said earlier in the aspect of the courting phase, It's understanding what exactly am I aligning myself with energetically. What am I aligning myself with energetically? This bloodline that I'm intertwining with. Is this bloodline in attunement with my inner? What is it in attunement with? Is it an attunement with the things that I need to resolve? Or is it an attunement with a lot of the shit that I left unresolved? So when we look at that type of space, that brings us into the aspect of change. Your biggest thing is the aspect of change, the aspect of transition for you. Is that feeling. Actually sitting and processing the feeling. Sitting with the feeling. Sitting with the emotion. Giving yourself that actual space for the change of that emotion. When it comes to us taking accountability, the first thing we got to take accountability with is how much time do I really need to give myself? What do I need to give myself? I don't know how to give this to myself. Me giving it to myself means it shall become unbiased. Me taking accountability is the full absolute of being unbiased. It is the full aspect of being impartial. That means it will not be receipt. That means me taking accountability and changing my habits, my patterns, and my behaviors is not going to be received in spaces where I lacked accountability. I'm going to put one more card, which is the Tower. I knew it was going to play off. The Tower card. A lot of shit, the thing that you're going to have to embrace over this next few cycles. I'm seeing a few cycles. Yeah, I'm seeing a few cycles. Mm-hmm. Now we coming into the aspect of that next cycle. The biggest thing for you in the aspect of this next cycle is how are you presently assessing that cycle? What tools have you picked up along the way? What tools, what methodologies, what things have you picked up along the way that you haven't noticed that you stopped using at a certain point in time? So the biggest thing when it comes to the tools that we have, especially moving through abandonment, is we have to accept that forgiveness for where we were. That fear based on abandonment is that apology to ourselves, making that decree of that changing and learning how to process in order to forgive ourselves in the spaces where we felt like we were abandoned. In order to move through that process of that abandonment process, is telling ourselves, our inner child, the aspect of the first abandonment when it happened and being like, okay, cool. I'm not going to give up on me. Everything that the things that I have to do on abandonment are going to seem extreme based on the only time that they seem extreme is because I was moving in that fear or that scarcity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Here's the thing with the aspects of that phoenix, that ashes. Every time you arise from the ashes, you are anew. Every time you arise from the ashes, you are anew. The other thing that people really don't realize about the phoenix or any of these aspects, any of these spiritual, especially with the spiritual aspects, is every time you go into a space, the first things that must come up are what are unresolved. Gratitude. The first thing that we must deal with is what has not been resolved. The first thing, every time you sit there and say, I I am in gratitude. I feel in gratitude. I feel through gratitude. My actions are in gratitude. I embrace with gratitude. I speak with gratitude. I envision with gratitude. I understand the purpose and the privilege of gratitude. You have to accept, good or bad, positive or negative, the negative shit that comes up. A lot of times one of the biggest things that I do not subscribe to when I talk to I tell all my clients, all my students, I tell everybody this shit, I do not subscribe to thinking positive. I do not subscribe to thinking positive. I subscribe to thinking constructively. Because there may be some negative shit that come up, but it's constructive and conducive to where I'm at presently. That means that argument that this person is going to have with me is necessary, even though I feel negative. Why am I feeling this way? Let me sit with that feeling with myself. Because let's look at the human version, the human aspect. Oh my God, this feels familiar. The point of you thinking constructively is till you get to the point to where it's unfamiliar. Only in the unfamiliar can we truly become present. Only in the unfamiliar space do we really understand exactly how much we need. Only in the unfamiliar space can I create a new space based on overflow. The overflow, the overwhelm of these emotions, anxiety, resentment, suppression, all of these missing pieces that are coming to the surface that need to be cultivated first must be felt. That means I'm going to be raw and I'm going to be vulnerable. One of the biggest things, especially when it comes to abandonment, and me saying that I am no longer going to abandon myself, I am going to sit with the process of feelings of where I used to abandon myself. I'm going to sit with the actions of where I used to abandon myself. I'm going to embrace those feelings of where abandonment used to come up with and how I used to react. I'm going to speak these things. Here's the thing about speaking. A lot of times, especially for the feminine, especially with abandonment is based on the lack of not being heard. Is the lack of being heard. Just because you are silent does not mean that you are silenced. When it comes, especially with abandonment wounds, being silent does not mean that you're being silenced. Being silent means that I am now able to observe. Being silent means I'm now able to observe. When it is my chance to speak, since I am cultivating my energy, I'm listening to my energy, I'm listening to my shit, I'm listening to my body, I know exactly when it's my time to speak. And I know that when I'm going to speak, I have fully processed it. Even if I have not processed it, I can accept what's going to come of this. See, the biggest thing about sitting in true vulnerability is that ability to sit inside of that space and be like, okay, that's what's next. That's what's next for me. Exactly. That aspect that that aspect into that space. Because here comes the thing. Especially when we think about, use an example. Another thing, people be like, I don't want to go into the darkness. Darkness is purity. Darkness is pure. The darkness is pure. The darkness is absolute. What most people get scared of with stepping into that space thinking constructively is where you haven't integrated with that shadow. See, your shadow is the result of you not sitting in that feeling or sitting inside of that space. Not constructively sitting. I don't know how to sit inside of that space. So by the time you get this new toy, i.e. this new energy, that new feeling, ooh, I got a new emotion I get to play with. How do I use it? you only can use it in spaces where it's familiar. Because if you wanted to use it in a space that's unfamiliar, it's not going to give you the result that you're looking for. But yes, I want you to take a nice deep breath. Take a nice deep breath. I appreciate you for allowing me to sit with you inside of that energy. Anybody else that heard that reading inside of that space, big ups and big kudos to Stephanie for that aspect, because even though that message was directed for her, everybody that was in this space with us of listening to that, how was that? How did you take that aspect and that side of that space? How did you feel a little bit inside of that space with yourself? The biggest aspect of us coming into this fiscal new year, 2024, is you're going to have to be really honest. You're going to have to be really honest. Those points where you usually try to resist, the point of being in honesty and that vulnerability is going to show you the difference between resistance and pressure. See, resistance keeps you tethering to, well, this hadn't happened yet, and this hadn't happened yet, and this hadn't happened yet, or the last time, keeps you in the future, or it keeps you in the past. Well, the last time that this happened, and the last time that I experienced this happened. You didn't experience it presently. See, pressure forces you to sit in the actual weight. It forces you to sit with the actual weight. Because once you start letting go, the only time you know something is heavy, the only time you know something is toxic, the only time you know something is bad, the only time you know something is not conducive to your life is when you let it go. Think about every time you left a relationship, I'm going to go get fit. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go focus on my money. All you told yourself in the present state was, you know what? I'm going to do it. Or you're only going to do it until that comes up again. Sitting in this vulnerability, sitting in that beauty of that vulnerability is not that you, sitting in this state of vulnerability is not based on you, okay, cool, I'm waiting for a space to be vulnerable. No. I'm always vulnerable. If my heart space is always open and it's designed in the aspect, it's attuned to love, the higher frequency, I'm able to transmute all energy that comes to that space. Anything that comes into my space that's making me feel some type of way, instead of me reacting to it, I respond to it, but like, I needed that. That was showing me that it's time for me to shift out of that space. It's time for me to do something more. I've been putting this off. Because remember, you're a brand. You're a platform. You're a corporation. You want to be an occultist. You want to be an alchemist. You want to be a witch. You want to be all these things. But you're building all of those things on the old patterns, behaviors, and habits. You haven't built out the new space because you're only doing it based on the aesthetics versus you actually processing it. That's why it never lasts that long. That's why the feeling is always fleeting. You're always running away from it. I desire you to be the motherfucking best. Appreciate y'all for stopping through. If anybody else would like a reading while we sitting here, while I'm doing this recap, just go ahead. The Cash App link is at the top. The Cash App link is at the top. If you don't want a reading, if you do not want a reading on the live, it's okay. You can hit me up in the inbox and we can set up a session. We can set up that reading session. We can set it up in the inbox and set it up. Again, I'm launching Tantra, however you would like to pronounce it. Tantra and Healing 888. I'm releasing that in the next month or so. Consultations. It all starts with a consultation with me. Hit me up in the inbox. Starts with a consultation. Everything from my shadowwork therapy program, to mentorship, to advisory, to charts, to everything. You might just need to have that first conversation. It's cool. Hit me up in the inbox. Understand these three magic phrases. Healing is a destructive process. If it wasn't a destructive process, why would you need to heal? You are deserving, but you are not entitled. That means the faith without the actual work is dead. Meaning you can go grab a green candle right now and ask for prosperity, but if you don't know how to budget your emotional intelligence, how will you be able to manage or sustain new patterns and create new patterns based on what you're trying to bring in? Faith without works is dead. And honesty is transparency to put you into that space of vulnerability to feel. I know a lot of those feelings sitting in there, and you ain't dealt with that moment that happened when you was 11 since now, and now you 30, 31, 32. You might be 45, 50, and you ain't dealt with that experience. So think about what came based on you not dealing with that one experience. So now think about all the experiences and all the moments that triangulated to create that one moment. I desire you to be the motherfucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best. I'm going to sit here and get a little more of this sun in before I go send out some emails. I love you. We love us. If nobody wanted to read another live reading, hit me up in my inbox and we can set something up for the week. See if I have any openings. We can go from there. Peace.